Hi again, Professor Monroe here, and in this video we're going to give you a general overview of the ethical theory of utilitarianism. This theory comes in several flavors, as you'll find out as we move through this unit, but this video is just sort of an overview of what the theory is all about and the ideas that all adherents of this theory share in common. The first thing to note is that utilitarianism is a consequentialist theory. As you'll recall, consequentialist theories believe that our moral judgments are determined by the outcomes or results of what we do, rather than by other factors. So the sole determinant of the rightness or wrongness of our action is whether or not it produces good consequences. So that immediately raises a fundamental question. What kinds of consequences are those that we're aiming to produce? Well, utilitarianism as a theory is all about what we call value maximization. Make as much good as you possibly can while minimizing as much bad as you possibly can. Now the question is, what is that good or bad that we're trying to minimize or maximize? In this course, you'll learn about what we call classic hedonistic utilitarianism. And the hedonistic utilitarians, and there are utilitarians of other sorts, I should clarify that up front, but classical hedonistic utilitarianism believes that there's one thing that's fundamentally morally good. One and only one thing. And that one thing that's fundamentally morally good, believe it or not, is pleasure. That feeling good is what's morally good, and nothing else. So, that which produces pleasure is right, and that which produces pain is wrong. Now, the utilitarians are slightly more sophisticated than that. They come up with various expressions for the idea of pleasure, that sensation of feeling good. They call it alternately satisfaction, they call it good, and they call it happiness. So, the utilitarians, in more contemporary hedonistic form, talk about maximizing happiness. That the point of behaving in a certain way is to produce as much happiness as one could possibly produce. When we do so, we make the world a better place. And if we produce unhappiness, by contrast, well, then we're making the world worse off. This is expressed in the big idea that the utilitarians put forward as their fundamental principle. This one rule that's supposed to help us decide how we act in any given circumstance, or to help us justify rules that we need for a well-functioning society. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. But the big idea for the utilitarians they call alternately the utility principle, which is how we'll refer to it in these videos, or the greatest happiness principle. Either word or either expression refers to the same thing, but the basic idea is this. If I want to decide what the right thing to do is, I apply this principle to help me figure out or calculate what the right action would be. This principle says the right action in any situation is the one that tends to produce the greatest possible balance of happiness over unhappiness for the greatest possible number. That end result of trying to balance happiness and unhappiness, utilitarians call net utility. We figure out the net utility of an action by adding as the sum of happiness that an option might produce, and then subtracting from that the sum of unhappiness that the action might produce, and the leftover number is that net utility. So just to give you a rough and ready example, suppose that my family were visiting from out of town and we were trying to decide whether or not to go to the beach or to go to Disneyland. And if I were a utilitarian, I might say, well, look, the right action here is the one that's going to produce the most happiness. So, roughly speaking, let's suppose that 10 of my family members wanted to go to Disneyland, Disney World, and that would make them really happy, and 2 of them wanted to go to the beach, and that would make them really happy, but doing the opposite would make them unhappy. The right action in this case seems pretty intuitively to be that we ought to go to Disney World. Why? Because the happiness of the 10 outweighs the unhappiness of the 2. The net utility in this case would be 8. The 10 happiness units assigned to the folks who are going to Disney World, subtracting the 2 unhappiness units from the folks who are forced to go along and don't really want to go and want to enjoy our beautiful beaches instead. Notice that the rightness or wrongness of any action is a function of the amount of net utility produced. No actions are inherently right or wrong or have moral value or weight. It's all about how things turn out. The more happiness an option produces, or an action produces, the better that action is. The less happiness an action produces, then the worse that action is. Typically speaking, actions that produce a net sum of happiness are morally permissible. But the best actions are the ones that make the most people happy. In future videos, we're going to talk about two versions of this theory. One we call act utilitarianism, and the other we call rule utilitarianism. And then we'll look at how to apply these theories to real-life moral problems.